Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 30th of November. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information for your village and community by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. You can call the weather info line at 800-472-0391, and during the day and certainly over the Thanksgiving weekend, we hope that you found some interesting and helpful information on Facebook, Twitter, or on YouTube. Perhaps that'd be a good place to go to see if you can find my tie, which apparently either a moose ate or gravity just pulled it out of my pocket. Don't know. But if you see it, let me know. Here's a look at what's going on around Alaska today. Up around the northern parts of southeast, winter weather advisories are posted for the Klondike Highway and the Haines community there, especially around White Pass. We're looking for some heavy accumulations of snow, about 3 to 7 inches or so in the next about 24 hours or so until about Tuesday evening. There's a good possibility that snow combined with wind will create some poor visibility and some tricky travel trouble out there. Try saying that about 5 times fast. And that will continue as the pressure gradient tightens up a little bit. Now the winds are going to come up a little bit more tomorrow for the marine areas. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But the main cause of this is still out across the western Gulf. So low pressure will be tracking eastward and spreading rain to more places than the places that'll be seeing snow there, again across the Klondike Highway and the Haines community as we go into tonight and tomorrow. A little bit further north, another winter weather advisory there for the central Beaufort Seacoast. That does include Prudhoe Bay and Kuparuk, as well as the coastal plain to the south. Nuiqsut, you're also included in this. This winter weather advisory is mainly for blowing snow. We're not expecting any new accumulating snow to fall, but we do expect visibility to drop off there. And it could drop below about a half mile or so at times with gusts over 35 miles per hour. So plan for some poor visibility there and we'll say approaching blizzard conditions there at times, or near whiteout conditions, let's say, as we get into the next overnight period and into tomorrow. So again, plan for some troubles there. As we look out across the west, you can see a lot of cold air is indicated by these kind of a speckledy, almost fish scale-like pattern there in the satellite picture out across the Bering. This is all flowing into pretty decent circulation here across the western Gulf. And then we have another wave of moisture moving across the North Pacific. Each one of these impulses is helping to energize the flow moving into the western Gulf. And the overall flow right now is a pretty cold one coming across the west. So places out across the west coast are significantly colder across areas from western Alaska all the way up to the north. And this is helping to increase the ice coverage too. In fact, a chunk of ice, a decent amount of ice, is moving south and west into the Chukchi Sea right now as it's breaking off the main pack. We'll talk about that coming up with your sea ice update in just a bit. As you look out across the west, you can see the circulation right now across the western Gulf. This is around 973 millibars or so. It has a front moving through the northern Gulf all the way into the far eastern side of the Gulf of Alaska. Along this boundary here, we're still seeing it slowly inch eastward. The frontal boundary itself is starting to fall apart, but it will kind of reform over and over again as we go into Wednesday and into Thursday. So this will be the main player that we're talking about for the rest of the week. In the meantime, moisture is working northward through southeastern Alaska. That's what's creating the winter weather advisories there for the northern parts of the Panhandle tonight. Out across most of the interior, things have been pretty quiet. There will be some additional wind moving across the Brooks Range as we go into the next day or so. And some of those gusts through the gaps and some of the lower foothills probably could create some turbulence and some flying issues there. Most of that stronger wind will be located across the west for the eastern Aleutians. Storm force winds are expected there for the marine areas. tonight and again into tomorrow. Here's a look at the low, 973 millibars, as I said, this afternoon. The clouds again working north and east, heading into the eastern Gulf. Pockets of rain there mostly today. We saw a little bit of rain across western parts of Prince William Sound, fog across the interior from Fairbanks eastward toward the Alcan border, and also across the Beaufort seacoast and points east all the way toward Kaktovik. There's another wave of low pressure out across the western Bering at 997 millibars. By tonight, that will probably stir up a few snow showers across the western part of the sea. For the central and eastern chain, snow showers are possible there. The low pressure system south and west of Kodiak and south of Sand Point at 976 millibars will keep a front moving north and away from that system across Bristol Bay into Kodiak Island and across the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. Winds will pick up a little bit more for southeast, and in fact, for the next 24 hours, the winds will probably be at the strongest for the Panhandle there. The triple point is just to your south. That keeps most of the precipitation across your region right now as rainfall, but once again, higher terrain in areas around Haines and northward up toward White Pass. We'll be seeing an opportunity for accumulating snow and probably occasional whiteout conditions there with the blowing and drifting snow possibilities. Out across south central, look for snow showers mainly over the Kenai Peninsula and the higher terrain, perhaps into Kachemak Bay as we head into Tuesday. Most areas will be dealing with relatively more clouds than anything else as you head northward toward Anchorage and the Matanuska and Susitna Valley. Snow showers are possible across the interior. There will be some areas of blowing snow south of the Brooks Range and just generally north of the central Yukon border, up across, or the Yukon River, I should say, across the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi Seacoast. Areas of blowing and drifting snow will be possible. And once again, those winter weather advisories will be in effect for the central Beaufort Seacoast, thanks to those gusts that could reach upwards of 35 miles per hour. It looks like rain and snow showers will generally miss most of the Pribilofs. The best chance of that happening will be just to your east, but there will be some in the region, so watch for that. Around Adak and Atka as well, still on the colder side of this low pressure system. As that tracks eastward for Wednesday, it reforms to about 972 millibars. And the front out across the north and eastern part of the Gulf will still be strong enough to produce some rainfall across the eastern and northern sections. Spotty areas of snow showers for some of the higher terrain, but the focus still up around the Haines region as well as the White Pass area. So again, travel conditions might be a little trickier there. Snow showers will be possible around the Anchorage Bowl as we head into Wednesday, as well as the Matanuska and Susitna Valley. So the Parks Highway might be a little bit more on the slick side there if things didn't get snowy enough for you over the end of the holiday week. And then back to the west, 963 millibar low for the central and western chain. This is going to bring more wind through the central chain and eventually a stronger flow of northerlies behind this system. So we'll be watching for that low pressure system to travel through the chain for Thursday and into the western Gulf as we head toward Friday. Again, blowing snow still an issue for the Chukchi Sea, and parts of the interior. We'll be looking at continuing snow showers there all the way up toward Eagle and into the western Yukon. Now, temperatures today were still fairly mild across southeast. You can see all the way from Cake to Klawock and Ketchikan and Annette. Temperatures for the most part were in the mid to upper 40s. Juneau was looking at temps in the upper 30s today, as well as Haines and Skagway. Yakutat was 34, Cordova 36. Around Valdez it was 27 degrees with 26 in Anchorage, 34 for Homer and for Seward, with Kenai showing 32, lower 40s for Kodiak. Looking northward, 9 below this afternoon around Fairbanks. It was 15 above for Healy. Fort Greely had 14, 19 in Eagle. And Tok, Northway, we're looking at temperatures in the single digits, but just barely so. 12 degrees in Fort Yukon, 9 in Arctic Village. It was 1 above for Anaktuvuk Pass. And Barrow and Atkasuk was about anywhere from 10 to about 13 below. Kaktovik was showing 4 below, 9 below around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. It was 7 below in Wainwright and lower to mid-20s there for most of the Kotzebue Sound region. Shishmaref had 18 degrees with 32 in Nome, 23 in Unalakleet. McGrath had 5 below. Tanana also 5 below today, 26 around Bethel and 19 around Grayling or so. Looks like Bristol Bay saw temps in the upper 30s this afternoon. Most of the Alaska Peninsula was in the lower 40s, and mid-30s were seen around St. Paul and St. George. 37 for both Adak and Atka, and it was 31 on Attu. Now, overnight low temperatures will be a little milder for some in the interior. Temperatures still holding around 0 to about 10 below for many in the middle Tanana Valley, and westward it gets a little bit milder. The Arctic coast will see temps from 5 to about 15 below. The west coast anywhere from the upper teens to lower 30s as you get down toward Bristol Bay. 36 in Kodiak Island, upper 30s and low 40s for southeast, mid 30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula and the chain. and it looks like South Central will be holding in the teens and 20s, some coastal regions holding closer to 30. We'll see highs tomorrow not changing too much for South Central, still in the upper 20s and low 30s, Southeast in the lower to mid 40s. The warmest spots, of course, Ketchikan, Craig, Klawock, and out around Sitka there with Juneau a little bit closer to that 40-degree mark. 7 in Fairbanks tomorrow. That'll be 7 above. Same goes for Fort Yukon and Eagle. Look for temps to be below 0, though, north of the Brooks Range summits, and that means most of the Arctic coast anywhere from about 0 to 5 below, and Barrow 4 below, 25 in Nome, 17 in Shishmaref, St. Lawrence Island looking at 30, Nunivak Island 27, and looks like the Bristol Bay region will hold in the upper 20s to lower 30s, 34 in St. Paul, with Dutch Harbor and Unalaska around 37 degrees tomorrow. Flying weather includes MVFR conditions across most of the Arctic coast. You'll see pockets of IFR out over the ice there west of the Chukchi Sea coast, St. Lawrence Island southward toward St. Matthew, and then generally north of the Alaska Peninsula, but east of Dutch Harbor and Unalaska and the Pribilofs. Look for IFR there, and across some of the higher terrain and into western British Columbia and Yukon. Otherwise, MVFR should be maintained for most of southeast, Prince William Sound region, Kodiak Island, most of the Alaska Peninsula, all the way up toward the St. Matthew Island waters, and increasing areas of poor visibility and lowered ceilings out across the west as the next wave of weather moves into the Bering. And at Tuvik Pass, we expect to see some improvements as we go toward VFR conditions in the afternoon. The same goes for Adigan Pass. Look for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass to see VFR conditions throughout the day. Rainy Pass right now is looking pretty good. Windy Pass, we're going to say VFR through most of your Tuesday. Isabel Pass, we expect to see visual flight roll. And Mentasta Pass looks like you'll head over toward MVFR conditions as we go through Tuesday. Tanita Pass expecting VFR conditions through most of the day. Portage Pass right now looks pretty good. And Chilkoot and White Pass with snow falling in the area as well as wind gusts blowing through. Expect IFR conditions throughout most of the day. Freezing levels show the surface freezing line really kind of holding in the right spot there, just north of the Pribilofs for now, and then dropping southward, covering over South Central and most of southeast. You can see the elevated freezing lines. They're anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 feet across the central and eastern Gulf. Everywhere else, of course, is sub-zero. Icing potential, generally you're going to have to go above 2,000 to about 4,000 feet in most areas where there's enough moisture. So from the Gulf of Anadyr to St. Matthew and then back over the Alaska Peninsula, we'll find at elevated risk. This should be occasional moderate there, and then across the northern Gulf above 1,000 feet for right now. The jet stream shows several waves of low pressure, and they're simply sliding down the slide here. Each one of these little bumps southward allows that colder air to drop across the west coast and over the Kamchatka Peninsula. Wind speeds are at their greatest just south of the chain, and those are running around 120 to 150 knots. Another faster wave of air is moving from west to east across the Arctic coast. That's about 55 knots for now. At 9,000 feet, low pressure sitting south of Kodiak Island. You can see more of a northerly draw going across some of the western capes, Bristol Bay and Norton Sound, and that's bringing in winds from about 10 to 15 knots. Over southeast, a pretty steady southerly flow around 20 to 30 knots. Across the Arctic coast, east to westerlies coming about 20 to 25 knots, and then we have some stronger winds across the central chain at around 40 to 50 knots from the north and west. And you can see that ridge is really helping to feed into that northerly flow from Norton Sound to the Alaska Peninsula at 25 to 30 knots. Out across the west, stronger southerlies are building into the western chain at 55 to 70 knots. And we still have our easterly flow. Some of that's still strong, though, across the north coast, 15 to 40 knots, with a southerly wind coming into southeast at 25 to about 30 knots in most cases. Low pressure, again, just sitting very close to Castle Cape and southwest Kodiak Island. Here's a look at your turbulence potential then for tomorrow. Below 4,000 feet, you're going to find some bumps across the central and eastern chain, maybe even some isolated severe if those winds kick up. Again, storm force winds are certainly expected tonight across the central and eastern chain, so don't be surprised to have a little trouble flying in and out of Dutch Harbor tomorrow. Below 6,000 feet across parts of Prince William Sound and southern parts of southeast below 6,000 feet. Some of that could easily reach widespread moderate, as well as areas in the central and western Brooks Range below 4,000 feet. And CHOP extends all the way out across the western Arctic coast and parts of the Alcan border. Let's look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back in just a few minutes with the rest of your marine weather and a look at the sea ice edge, and maybe, just maybe, I'll find my tie. Back to you.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. The past couple of weeks, we've had Dr. Melchor Antuñano on. He's the director of the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, and he's got a wealth of knowledge about many, many topics that are of interest to us in the aviation community. He also was the presenter at our fall safety seminar, and he agreed to do some interviews on the topics that he talked about. So if you caught the last 3 or so, you'll know what I'm talking about. But Dr. Mel's back with us tonight, and he's going to talk about something I think you'll find very interesting, and that's new trends in aviation technologies. Dr. Mel, welcome back.
Thank you, Harry. Appreciate it. This is another topic that I'm very, very enthusiastic about it, because like all aspects of technology, the one that applies to aerospace transportation is having exponential growth. It's not linear anymore. It's exponential. There are so many advances in different ways of flying, and it is not just, for example, the technology, the electronics. We're talking about advances in materials. You have, for example, the new Boeing 787 that is a full composite fuselage. That has actually changed the way we think about failure modes for a fuselage compared to aluminum. Now you have composite, which is a lot stronger, but that has also aeromedical implications. You can pressurize that airplane, maintain like a cabin pressure at 5,000 feet when you're flying at an even higher altitude. But we go also with other modalities of transportation. We are back to personal flying machines. And back to personal flying machines, we are actually following developments of several ones, like for example, one in New Zealand, that essentially you have 2 propellers on your back pointing up. Is a kind of a fan type device. Right now has reached an altitude of about 12,000 feet. It has an autonomy of 30 minutes. At this point, they started doing the demonstrations with police departments, with rescue squads, but that company wants to bring that technology to the United States. In fact, last week, Dubai, the government in Dubai announced that they want to buy already units for use by their police department and rescue units. So now we're talking about to the old dreams that we all had of having a machine on your back and you can fly around. But that's just one of them. We have several other proposals on machines that you can sit on with multiple propellers. You have other designs that can be hybrids, like for example, just like the squirrel suit that you use for some skydiving. Well, if you use a deployable wing, solid wing with micro turbines, now we have people like Yves Rosie who crossed the English Channel and who crossed the Grand Canyon using one of these things that he was strapped to. And what happens if those things start getting commercialized and available to the public? But then we go not only on the manned side. What about the unmanned, with unmanned aerial systems, unmanned aerial vehicles? What will be the implications of introducing a new type of technology such as that into the national airspace system? But that's not the end of it. We have the Terrafugia. It is a car, a first flying car, that essentially is in the process right now trying to get certification from both the National Highway Transport Safety Administration and from us, the FAA, as a flying car that has collapsible wings. You deploy them and you use car fuel to operate that particular type of airplane. But that's in aviation. Well, we have developments in suborbital space vehicles, civilian, suborbital and orbital space vehicles. We have right now development of Bigelow Aerospace developing an inflatable space station that would be a private space station. So we're talking about the convergence of different types of technologies that we have to integrate in a seamless national aerospace system. That becomes very challenging, but it becomes very interesting, because now that really pushes the envelope on all of the things that we have to assess from the human-machine point of view. But also we have to address, well, what else is going to happen with all of these developments? We have electric airplanes. In fact, in Europe, they're selling several ultralight and also some GA electric airplanes. So everything keeps evolving. We keep getting more changes. But the reality is that we keep advancing and advancing at a very, very fast pace. That's why it's being considered exponential development.
Well, Dr. Mel, I've got to tell you, it's been a real pleasure having you here in Alaska, having you as our guest and guest speaker at the Safety Foundation. And I'd like to point out to our listeners that you, sponsored by the FAA and CAMI, took time out of your very busy schedule to come up here to Alaska to see what we're doing, to make the presentation at the safety seminar, to be on hangar flying. And also, I think you're taking back a few potential research projects to help us make aviation safer up here. Thank you very much for doing that.
Oh, thank you for the invitation. It has been a pleasure. And I have learned a lot as well here in Alaska.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program, and let me remind you that hangar flying, the safety seminars, our scholarships, everything that the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation does is solely through your membership. We are member supported. We are, if you all don't sign up as members, renew your membership for 2015, we can't bring programs like this to you. So please, please go online and renew your membership for 2015 so we can bring you programs like Dr. Mel. Until next time, fly safe.
Hey Harry, can I borrow your tie? No? All right. Thanks. I appreciate you thinking about it. Okay, guys, here's a look at the sea surface temperatures. And out across the west, you can see the temperatures are really dropping off. The really dark blue colors here indicate temps at or even just below that 0 degree mark. And as we get into that magical mystery point of about 0 to -1, conditions are certainly favorable for very quick freeze up across, especially places like the Chukchi Sea. Now, the problem we've been having with conditions not freezing up quickly, right, there's the wind. The wind is moving around, and in fact, a chunk of the Arctic pack here is dropping south and west. Pretty normal stuff to have happen with the wind, but a big mass of the thicker concentrated ice is moving south and west into areas that have less concentrated ice. So we're going to see that moving around south of the shoals a little bit, and once again, if the winds slow down a little bit more in the Chukchi Sea, a lot of this is going to freeze over very quickly, so be prepared for that. And again, we're going to see some areas of freezing spray, some of that pretty heavy across areas north and south of the Bering Strait as a result of the wind and the open water in some cases in those regions. So watch for more and more ice as soon as that wind starts to let off. You can always check the latest sea ice forecast and the outlook, as well as the analysis anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. Now across southeast, remember tomorrow's going to be a little bit of the windier times there across the inner waterways, anywhere from 15 to 35 knots with seas ranging from 3 feet in the north to about 6 feet in the south. There will be some higher gusts in the region out across the outer coast, 20 to 35 knots with seas from 11 to about 12 feet on Tuesday. Conditions should improve in most areas for Wednesday. Northerlies are going to pick up in the Lynn Canal up to 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, 30-foot seas, or 30-knot winds, I should say, across the Dixon Entrance and the Clarence Strait. 6-foot seas there. That sounds a lot better, doesn't it? Southeasterlies up the outer coast, 20 to 30 knots with 10 to 11-foot seas. A few areas south of Sitka will be a little bit higher, up around 15-foot. There for Wednesday in southeast. Now for south central northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 15 knots, 11-foot seas on the outside with 25-knot winds, and those 25-knot winds in the northern and western Gulf will run about 11 to 12-foot seas there for Tuesday. Coming down Cook Inlet, a little bit windier, 20 to 35 knots with 5-foot seas in the north and 12-foot seas south of Callaghan Island. 25-knot winds there inside of Shelikof Strait with an 8-foot sea for Tuesday. Wind should diminish a little bit in all areas as we get into Wednesday, a little bit more on the variable side east of Kodiak Island and south of Seward and outside of Resurrection Bay. Northeasterlies continue at 15 knots inside of Prince William Sound with a 3-foot sea, and southeasterlies develop outside of Montague Island and in the northern Gulf Coast, 20 knots with an 8-foot sea there for Wednesday. Now for the Alaska Peninsula, 20 knots inside of Bristol Bay, a northeasterly flow there with 5-foot seas. Much stronger winds down the coast along the Alaska Peninsula, 40-knot winds there north of Cold Bay and south of King Cove and Sand Point, with 15-foot seas on either side, 20 knots as you head into Castle Cape to Chignik. Now for Wednesday, winds diminish there, especially across the southern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. 25 to 30-knot winds there with seas ranging from about 11 feet on the western end to about 4 to 7 feet from Bristol Bay out toward the southern tip of Kodiak Island for Wednesday. For the Alaska Peninsula, a little bit of a different story. Remember, storm force winds tonight for the central and eastern chain, and for tomorrow again for the eastern chain with winds from 50 to 55 knots, 25 to 27-foot seas with higher gusts, of course, in the region. Out across the central and western chain tomorrow, rapidly improving conditions with 30 to 35-knot winds and seas ranging from about 12 to as high as 17 feet. For Wednesday, though, conditions start to worsen again across areas from Adak to Kiska. 45-knot winds there, 17-foot seas as the next wave of low pressure moves eastward, and that's going to bring up the winds for Adak and Atka as well. Expect higher gusts. Winds will diminish briefly, but they will be highly variable in their circulation as there's a lot of weather systems kind of impacting this very small area here. So plan for a lot of changes as we go from Tuesday to Tuesday night to Wednesday and probably into Thursday as well. So stay abreast of the weather. For across the western coast, north and easterly winds coming down the YK Delta and into Nunivak Island, 20 knots there with a 5 to 6 foot sea. Northwesterlies around St. Matthew and the Pribilofs. Those winds as high as 35 knots in the Pribs with a 12-foot sea expected there for Wednesday. Winds shift around to more of a southwesterly direction with an opposing northeasterly flow coming off the mainland over St. Lawrence Island. That's 20 knots with a 6-foot sea, and heavy freezing spray to your north should be watched. Same goes for areas along the Chukchi Seacoast with winds there at 25 to 35. Over the areas of open water, look for seas ranging from 5 to 10 feet, so it rapidly picks up the further north you go. You'll get into easterlies over the ice, 25 to 30 knots there. And for Wednesday, expect a northeasterly flow, still holding around 20 to 30 knots, stronger west of Cape Lisburne to Point Hope and out over Kotzebue Sound with a 9 to 10-foot sea for Wednesday. Recapping tonight's weather, winter weather advisories are posted for the Haines and Klondike Highway areas with a little bit more snow expected the further up you go toward White Pass, so watch travel conditions there as you go through tomorrow. Not expecting a whole lot of precipitation across South Central. Some rain showers across Kodiak Island and maybe a rain-snow mix across the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula and Kachemak Bay. Snow showers around the Brooks Range and perhaps over the Pribilofs and the Central Chain. There is a winter weather advisory, though, for the central Beaufort Seacoast and the northern Arctic coastal plain. Those areas could see near whiteout conditions from time to time, not quite blizzard level, but visibility may drop below a half mile. So be extra careful there if you are having to venture outside for any length of time. Check the weather and make sure someone knows where you are. As we look out across the Gulf, a frontal boundary working north and east will keep rainfall going across the north and eastern Gulf Coast, and a new storm working into the central chain with storm force winds tonight for the central and eastern chain as we head into Tuesday. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.